Votes for 16-year-olds. Winston.
Ludicrous idea.
How old are you?
Well, I'm 35. What difference does that make to my opinion?
You look older. Anyway, carry on.
Ouch.
She's guaranteeing being invited back.
I didn't know we were allowed ad hominem. I'll resist returning the favour.
You would have felt differently at 16.
No, at 16 I didn't think, why should I have the vote at 16? 16-year-olds, I'm sorry, you don't
can leave
know anything.
home, you can pay tax, you have a national insurance number, you can have sex. Consensual sex.
I just don't think that 16-year-olds have a really good concept of how everything works. I don't.
But physiologically, your brain isn't fully developed until you get to 25.
No, indeed.
I would actually be in favour of moving the vote to 25.
But arguably, once you get to Ian Blackford's age, physiologically, your brain isn't what it once was either. I mean, it's fascinating.
Thank you, Tessa.
No, but if we're going to...
You're probably right.
Have you got one ready for Bim and me as well?
It's just if you're going to, play politics with the development of the brain, it does peak somewhere. I mean, best time to learn a foreign language is age 7, but try getting a 95-year-old to redo a driving test and
but
she
a
might fail it.
95-year-old has a lifetime of experience, and that's exactly what the type of people I want voting, people with experience.
Okay, but
All right.
actually 53%...
We're running out of time.
So
Ian, if your brain's agile enough to answer this question...
Tessa doesn't think it is. But, today, the 18th of September, is the day of the Scottish independence referendum in 2014. And in that referendum, 16 and 17-year-olds had the vote. We had a yes shop in the main street in Portree, and young people from Portree High School used to come in every day on both sides of the argument. My goodness, they were well informed, and it was just fantastic to see the engagement that we had with young people.
There's not all of these dates are arbitrary, but we are spending our time in society increasing the age at which young people can do things, whether it be going on sunbeds, smoking, going into pubs. We're increasing those things to 18, and yet the same people who are in favour of increasing those things to 18 say the most important thing you can do in a democracy, vote, they want to reduce to 16. Makes no sense. We've got to pick an age at which people are adults. As a society, we appear to have picked that age at 18, therefore everything needs to track that point. If people want it to be 16, then everything should be 16. It's ludicrous to say somebody is not able to walk into a pub and buy a drink or smoke and at 16, and yet, oh no, we should let them vote.
My question's regarding Liz Truss, her time as Prime Minister, what I would call a period of kamikaze Trussonomics. If Boris Johnson is Punch and Liz Truss is Judy, have we had enough of the laughable Punch and Judy politics? Also, did their failures at being Prime Minister show us that's not the way to do it?
Oh, very good. Liz Truss today defended her policies as Prime Minister 1 year since leaving office and called on Rishi Sunak to cut taxes, reduce how much welfare payments go up by, raise the retirement age and delay net zero targets. I'm sure, Bim Afalami, you agree with all of that.
First of all, I congratulate the caller on his very well-framed question. My view is that both Boris and Liz, in their own ways, have shown us how not to do it as leading the country. In relation to Liz herself, she manifestly failed. Something that hasn't really come out in the media reporting of this, which I think is quite curious, is that one of the core reasons why sort of Liz's government fell apart was obviously the sort of financial chaos and all that was going on that we remember, but also it was just a manifest lack of support in the parliamentary party. And the reason why there was such a lack of support in the parliamentary party is because when you're in Parliament, you do see people close up. You see them on a day-to-day basis. And I think there was a considerable number of colleagues who just felt that temperament-wise, and actually I think Kwasi said something very similar to this, her temperament wasn't right to be Prime Minister. Having said all of that, I do think, and I didn't support her at the time, and at all, as Ian, I do think that she did a light on something that is quite important, which is economic growth is lower in this country and has been for 15, 20 years than we would like, that we need in order to pay for the things that we all want and to make ourselves more prosperous. If our growth rate had gone up after the financial crisis by the same rate that it had gone up for the 15 years before the financial crisis, our GDP would be, I think, 22 or 23% higher today. And just imagine how much more money that is for our public services, for all of our families and households. But But the problem with Liz is just because she alighted on the right problem didn't mean that all the solutions she was advocating were correct. And that's the tragedy for people like me and many others in the Conservative Party, and I'm sure the Labour Party, who do care about growing the economy.
Isn't the truth that it's actually Rishi Sunak's fault that she was ever Prime Minister? Because he persuaded some of his supporters, you may be one of them, Pim, to back Liz Truss in that second ballot over, so Penny Mordaunt wouldn't be able to be the one to get into the vote in the country.
Nobody ever asked me to do that, and I've never heard anybody say that to me.
Well, you heard it here first.
Penny Mordaunt.
Ian Blackford.
Her of the sword-wielding Penny.
Indeed.
So,
well, she couldn't have been worse than Liz Truss, could she?
No, I mean, she was a steady hand on the day of the coronation.
She was. That's all we want, a steady hand at the tiller, don't we? Ian Blackford.
Well, indeed. I don't think I'll ever forget that Friday morning where we had the financial statement from Kwasi Kwarteng, crashed the financial markets, led to the Bank of England having to intervene, the fall in the pound, the increase in interest rates that happened, the mortgage payments that people were then facing as a consequence of all of that. My goodness, it was an unmitigated disaster. Well, I'll actually agree with Bim. I mean, if we go back to the financial crisis way back in 2008, 2009, we had a massive monetary expansion, the quantitative easing programme, which has driven up asset prices, which in particular has helped those of us with assets. But what was quite stunning was that there was a complete mismatch between monetary and fiscal policy. That's the reason that we haven't had economic growth since the financial crisis. And you don't fix that problem by cutting tax. You fix that problem by dealing with the components of demand. We need an industrial strategy. We need to recognise that we've got to get to net zero. I mean, this nonsense today about talking about delaying net zero. We need to embrace the opportunities that the green energy revolution...
But I thought we did have an industrial strategy, Ben. Didn't Greg Clark introduce one under Theresa May? Has that just gone by the board?
I think there have been a few since Greg. I mean, what the truth is, we don't have one industrial strategy. We've got different strategies for different sectors. So, for example, we've had the announcement on steel. We've had automotive sector, BMW making the big investment. Financial services is doing better than it was. So we have strategies in different parts.
It's all piecemeal. It needs to be done. And you need to have a central strategy that says out of that opportunity to deliver green energy, that we need to create a competitive advantage. I've argued that the Scottish Government needs to have an industrial council in the First Minister's office with a secretariat, with a relentless focus on delivering over the course of the next 10-year period. We've got excellence in academia. Where's the plan for the spin-outs and the real development of new companies for the next generation? The way that has happened in the States, for example, we can't run away from these things. And yet what we've had with both governments over the course of the last couple of decades is a lack of ability to engage in that. And we're holding people back, we're holding the country back, we're not creating the job opportunities. And as a result, we've got public services which are now stretched beyond a level which is reasonable. That's the issue. And that's why what I would agree with you and I'd agree with Liz is that we need to deliver economic growth, but you need to have a plan for it.
Well, just on that, the big missing part of sort of the strategy to increase our economic growth rate is actually the efficacy of the government. Looking at the Quango state is sort of out of control. It's sprawling. We've got, takes too long.
It's been in power for the last 13 years. Francis Maude, under David Cameron, tried to do something about that.
He did actually, and did a good job.
Well, he might have done, but why are we still in the situation that you just described?
I think we've lost focus on it, and we need to get it back. And I would
but Liz Truss is not helping.
No,
she's not providing clarity.
What I would also add is, things like the time it takes to deliver new housing or time it takes to deliver infrastructure. These sorts of things are critical in getting our economic growth rate up. They are supply side in sort of economic jargon, but actually, I think all of us, whatever your political persuasion, would agree on those things.
And that's where the Chinese will always beat us, because they don't have these problems. They can just decide, okay, we're going to have a housing estate there, so let's build it within a year.
Then the Chinese have all sorts of other problems that I would argue are worse.
Winston?
All of this to me is just a reminder. I mean, Liz Truss kind of personifies the lack of talent for me in the Tory party, and I say that with some respect, because it's not. I admire to an extent politicians. It's a difficult job, but I'm really worried about this country, and I agree with what you said about growth. The aspirational are leaving this country, and I know that anecdotally. And the entrepreneurs are leaving this country. We're in trouble, and I want to see from your colleagues the talent and the leaders come out with a real vision. And I don't know if it's necessarily a centralised vision, but something that's going to be like this, that's going to attract the brilliant minds of the world here, that's going to turn this around. 40% of this country are... this is something I've got from a Louise Perry article at The Spectator. Those of us earning 40 grand or less take more from the state than we put in. And that's really concerning. I don't really see how it's turning around. I don't see anyone with a vision to turn this round.
Tessa, hang on a second. Tessa.
First of all, what would concern me greatly if I was you, Bim, going into the next election, is that there she is hogging all the headlines today, Liz Truss. She's clearly playing a long political game. She wants to make something of a comeback in the wake of the predicted Conservative defeat, when the party will predictably probably tack to the right. So this is kind of dark. This is like skull and crossbones politicking. I thought, oh my goodness, she's sort of come back quite literally from the dead. Then we're going to get her awful honours list. So I feel sorry for you, and I'm sorry about that. But Bim, in comparison, is a very decent chap. I always was very wary, by the way, of Liz Truss. She's, again, one of my contemporaries. Me, Liz Truss and Russell Brand. We were a terrible lot, weren't we? Born in the mid-70s.
It's your fault.
It's all our fault.
We're about to start a very bad rumour then. Ian, make sure the lawyers...
Only your perverted mind.
Blame it on Bim. But she studied politics.
The election slogan.
She studied politics, philosophy and economics at Oxford. We were off at the same time.
Did you know her?
No. Can I find the class of degree she got? When those two were head and head, Rishi and Liz, he was first class degree. First class. It was every single headline, Rishi's great brain. So I dug and I dug. I rang the university. I dug further. I can't find any classification for that degree. So if somebody could shed light on that matter, I'd be most grateful. No, she's a write-off. The Tories are predictably, probably, I'm afraid, because you haven't got the economic growth moving. I mean, what she said about productivity, you just needed to watch a recent panorama to know that the French, they apparently, the average worker, is worth £59 compared to the Brit who's worth 18, and yet we're working just as hard. It's just we have an ice cream scoop and they've got a great big electric squirter as sort of a metaphor for an example of how our economy is moving at the moment. It's very bad news. And finally and tragically, the United Nations Assembly this week, where previously Britain, as a leading environmental campaigner with big green revolution visions, we're a bunch of islands, we've got the capacity we have to embrace the green future is extraordinary. We're not. Oliver Dowden, who he is going, because Rishi knows, tail between his legs, he's drilling in the North Sea.
Is he not going? Is Rishi
No, he's not going. He's drilling to nowhere in the North Sea. He's too embarrassed, isn't he? I reckon. Why do you think Rishi's not going, Bim?
I have no idea. But Oliver, is Deputy Prime Minister. I think he's senior enough.
I was listening to an American station this morning, and they said this is because Britain used to be a leader when it came to green, but the current administration no longer leads.
Yeah, I'm really worried about that because in Scotland we've got massive opportunities. We're about 5% of the offshore wind market in the world, but we need to create the circumstances that people want to come here to invest. And Winston, your point about talent, I think, is a very real one. We still got academic institutions right across the UK that excel. We encourage students to come here, and then we tell them they have to leave. Rather than actually saying, you have a right to make...
Well, that's assuming they get a degree because the lecturers are on strike and they won't have their papers.
Yeah, but the point is, I want people to come here and to make their future here, and to be part of our story, part of our growth. We need labour, we need talent, we need to grow the economy. Unless you
I thought we had a headline there.
I know, I did
we
too.
need labour.
Not that sort of labour.
Okay. I'm reassured by that.